The rain taps softly against the leaded glass of Osborne House. A rhythmic sound that has become the heartbeat of these final years. I sit by the window, watching gray waves roll in, their white crests breaking with a gentle, eternal sigh. The scent of salt and damp earth drifts through the open sash, mingling with the faint, lingering aroma of lavender and old paper that fills this room. My hands rest upon the wooden arm of the chair, the grain worn smooth by decades of touch, a tactile anchor to a life that has spanned so much change. The fire crackles low in the grate, casting long, dancing shadows that seem to whisper of the past, of faces long turned to dust, of voices that once filled these halls with laughter and argument. It is a peaceful silence, not the empty silence of neglect, but the heavy, comforting silence of memory. The clock on the mantel ticks with a steady, unhurried pace, marking the seconds not as a countdown, but as a gentle progression toward rest. In this stillness, the weight of the crown feels less like a burden and more like a familiar cloak, woven from threads of joy and sorrow, of triumph and profound loss. The air is cool, inviting a deep, slow breath that settles the spirit. There is no rush here, no urgent summons from the ministers or the generals. Only the rain, the sea, and the quiet unfolding of a life, reviewed in the soft light of the afternoon. A small table stands near the window, holding a vase of fresh flowers that have begun to soften at the edges. The heavy curtains filter the daylight into a soft, golden haze that pools on the floorboards. A portrait of a beloved husband hangs on the wall, watching over the room with a gentle gaze. The fire in the hearth continues to crackle quietly, casting dancing shadows on the pale walls. But the clock on the mantelpiece ticks with a steady, rhythmic sound that measures the time. Outside, the sea rolls in against the shore with a gentle, repetitive motion. The sky above is a pale blue, streaked with thin clouds that move slowly. The air is cool and crisp, carrying the salt of the ocean into the room. A book lies open on the bedside table, its pages worn from frequent reading. The text speaks of history and the lives of those who have come before. The room feels still and peaceful, a sanctuary from the demands of the outside world. The silence is not empty, but filled with the memory of a long and full life. The era that began with a coronation in 1837 finally draws to a close with her passing in 1901. That silence following the end of a reign was profound and deeply felt across the empire. Her life had spanned a century of unprecedented change and industrial growth. She witnessed the rise of steam power and the expansion of global trade networks. The Victorian age was named for her and defined by her personal characteristics. Her final years were marked by a desire for peace and a return to family. She found comfort in the presence of her grandchildren and close servants. The heavy curtains of her bedroom filtered the daylight into a soft, golden haze. A small table stood near the window, holding a vase of fresh flowers. The scent of lavender and dried herbs filled the air with a soothing aroma. The wooden floorboards creaked softly under the weight of her slow, careful steps. A portrait of Prince Albert hung on the wall, watching over the room with a gentle gaze. The fire in the hearth crackled quietly, casting dancing shadows on the pale walls. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked with a steady, rhythmic sound that measured the time. Outside, the sea rolled in against the shore with a gentle, repetitive motion. The sky above was a pale blue, streaked with thin clouds that moved slowly. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the salt of the ocean into the room. A book lay open on the bedside table, its pages worn from frequent reading. The text spoke of history and the lives of those who had come before. The room felt still and peaceful, a sanctuary from the demands of the outside world. The silence was not empty, but filled with the memory of a long and full life. The end of her reign marked the beginning of a new era for the nation. Her son would lead the country into the 20th century with his own style. The Victorian age remained a distinct period in the history of the British Isles. Her influence on the monarchy and the empire would endure for generations too. My earliest memories are not of grand halls or bustling courts, but of the quiet, somewhat shadowed rooms of Kensington Palace. A place where I was raised under the watchful, often suffocating eye of my mother, and the stern control of Sir John Conroy. The air in those rooms always felt heavy, thick with the scent of stale lavender and the dust that settled on velvet drapes, which had not been drawn back in many days. I remember the cold touch of the marble floor beneath my small feet as I walked to the window, looking out at a garden that seemed too large and too distant to ever truly reach. The silence. There was not peaceful, but rather a held breath, a waiting tension that vibrated through the floorboards and into the soles of my shoes. My days were measured by the ticking of a clock that seemed to move slower than time itself, each second stretching out like a long, thin thread of wool. I spent hours sitting alone in a small chair, watching the light change on the walls as the sun moved across the sky, painting the plaster in shades of pale gold and soft gray. A small porcelain figurine of a shepherdess stood on the mantelpiece, watching over the quiet space with painted eyes that never blinked. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, sending warmth across the Persian rug that covered the wooden floor. Yet the chill of isolation often seemed to seep through the walls regardless of the heat. Shadows lengthened slowly as the sun began its descent toward the horizon beyond the glass, turning the familiar objects in the room into strange, huge, elongated shapes. The atmosphere was one of profound calm, inviting the observer to rest and reflect on the day that had passed. Yet for a child, this calm felt like a cage. No voices disturbed the silence, only the rhythmic breathing of the house itself in its evening slumber, a sound that was both comforting and deeply lonely. I learned to find comfort in the small details, the way the light caught the edge of a silver teapot, or the texture of the heavy wool blankets that were tucked around me at night. The burden of a future I could not yet understand weighed heavily on my small shoulders, a weight that grew with every passing year. I faced the challenge of balancing my own desires with the strict rules imposed by those who govern my life. A task that required a strength of character that few children could ever hope to possess. My grief was a constant companion that shaped my worldview and influenced my approach to the world in later years. Even before I had truly lost anything, I found ways to cope by immersing myself in the details of my books and the care of my small, private world. The support of my few loyal friends and my beloved mother provided a foundation that helped me endure the years of confinement and strict discipline. My life story remains a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of profound isolation and the slow, steady growth of a young girl in a house of rules. The Queen's dedication to her family and her country defined the era that bears her name today. Yet it began in these quiet, shadowed rooms, where a child learned to be still. The silence in the archives regarding her personal practice is a consistent feature of the historical record. A quiet gap where one might expect to find the scribbles and sketches of a young artist. Researchers have found no mention of her major works in the standard reference materials. A silence that stands in contrast to the detailed accounts of her public life and political decisions. The focus of her artistic energy clearly lay in the curation of spaces and the commissioning of artists, a way of shaping the world without needing to master the craft herself. She preferred to work through intermediaries who possessed the technical skills she may have lacked, allowing her to direct the aesthetic environment of her residences with a clear and steady vision. This approach allowed her to shape the visual style that reflected her tastes and values throughout her reign, creating a cohesive look that spoke of her inner world. The Indian dining room at Osborne House stands as a testament to her later artistic commissions and tastes, a space that would be built long after these early years of isolation. Constructed in 1890, this space was designed by John Lockwood Kipling to evoke the grandeur of the East, a dream of a distant land that began with the small, quiet imaginings of a girl in Kensington. The room featured intricate woodwork and vibrant colors that transported the viewer to a distant land, far away from the gray skies and heavy curtains of her childhood. Sikh artisans led by Baj Ram Singh executed the detailed craftsmanship with remarkable skill and precision, carving wooden panels and creating decorative elements that filled the room with a sense of exotic beauty. The walls were adorned with patterns and motifs that reflected the rich artistic traditions of India, a world that existed only in stories and pictures during those long, quiet days. Soft light filtered through the windows, illuminating the golden hues of the wood and the deep reds of the textiles, creating an atmosphere that felt both intimate and majestic. The atmosphere within the room felt both intimate and majestic, inviting quiet contemplation of its details. A sanctuary where the noise of the world could not penetrate. Visitors could trace the fine lines of the carvings and admire the complexity of the design, seeing the hand of the creator in every curve and angle. The space served as a private retreat where the queen nor yet could escape the formalities of court life. A place where she could be alone with her thoughts and memories. It represented a fusion of British imperial ambition and Indian artistic heritage. A blending of worlds that began with a simple desire for beauty in a lonely room. The room remained closed to the public until after her death, preserving its original splendor and the quiet dignity of its creation. This sanctuary offered a glimpse into her personal appreciation for diverse cultural expressions, a window into the mind of a woman who had learned to find solace in the details of the world around her. The craftsmanship of the artisans was evident in every corner of the room, a testament to the power of art to transform a space and a spirit. The careful attention to detail created a harmonious environment that soothed the spirit, a place where the chaos of the outside world could be held at bay. The scent of polished wood and the texture of the fabrics added to the sensory experience, filling the air with a warmth that had been missing from the early years of her life. It was a place where art could speak without words, where the beauty of a carved panel could tell a story of resilience and hope. On the desk lay a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with neat, looping handwriting that recorded the thoughts and feelings of a young girl. Beside it rested a silver inkwell, catching the pale morning light with a gentle gleam that seemed to dance on the surface of the liquid. The air smelled faintly of beeswax and dried lavender, a scent that lingered in the old house and brought back memories of the quiet rooms of Kensington. Outside the window, the garden stretched out in a tapestry of green and blooming flowers, a world of color that seemed so vibrant against the gray stone of the palace walls. A stone path wound through the grass, leading toward a small fountain that trickled softly. Its sound a constant reminder of the passage of time. The water sparkled in the sunlight, creating a rhythmic sound that filled the silence. A melody that was both simple and profound. Birds moved among the branches of the ancient trees, their songs providing a natural melody that seemed to speak of freedom and life beyond the walls. The room felt still and peaceful, a sanctuary away from the demands of the world, a place where a young girl could dream of a future that was her own. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light that pierced the gloom of the interior, moving with a rhythm matched the slow passage of hours. A single chair sat in the corner, upholstered in faded blue fabric that showed signs of age, a silent witness to the many hours spent in thought and reflection. The walls were adorned with simple portraits of family members, their faces watching with silent approval, their eyes following the movements of the girl in the room. The floorboards creaked softly under the weight of history, a sound that spoke of the morning light filtered through the heavy curtains of Kensington Palace, casting a pale, dusty glow upon the wooden floorboards. Where I first stood as a sovereign, the air inside felt still, suspended in a moment that stretched endlessly before the weight of the future could settle upon my small shoulders. I remember the silence of that room, a silence that had once been filled with the hushed whispers of my mother and the stern voice of Sir John Conroy, a man whose shadow had loomed large over my childhood years. Now, the silence belonged only to me, a vast and terrifying expanse that demanded to be filled with the sound of my own breathing. The transition from a secluded princess to the ruler of an empire happened in the blink of an eye. Yet it felt like a slow, deliberate unfolding of a flower in winter. I walked to the window and placed my hand against the cold glass, feeling the vibration of the city beyond, a city that did not yet know I had become its queen. The news of my uncle's passing had arrived with a quiet finality, stripping away the pretense of my youth and leaving only the stark reality of duty. I was 18 years old, and the crown was already resting on my head, heavy with the expectations of centuries. I moved through the rooms of the palace with a new purpose, my steps firm and deliberate, leaving behind the girl who had been told what to think and what to feel. The change in the household was immediate and absolute, as I banished the men who had controlled my life and sought to build a new foundation of trust and respect. Respect My mother was moved to a separate wing. A decision that brought a sharp pain to my heart, but was necessary for the survival of my own spirit. I sat at the desk, where I would sign my first orders, the inkwell cold to the touch, and the quill feeling light and fragile in my hand. The paper before me was blank, waiting for the first mark that would define the next 64 years of my life. I thought of the vast lands that now answered to my name. From the icy shores of Canada to the warm sands of India. A world so large it seemed impossible to comprehend. Yet, in that quiet room, the only world that mattered was the one I could touch and see and feel around me. The fire in the hearth burned low, sending up thin trails of smoke that curled toward the ceiling like silent prayers, prayers for guidance and strength. The days that followed were a blur of meetings and audiences, of men in dark coats bowing low and speaking in voices that trembled with a mixture of fear and hope. I listened to their words, absorbing the complexities of state with a mind that had been sharpened by years of rigorous study. I had learned geography and mathematics with a diligence that surprised my tutors. And now those lessons served as the bedrock of my rule. I understood the maps of the world, the currents of the oceans, and the delicate balance of power that held nations in a fragile peace. My musical talents, nurtured in the quiet hours of my youth, provided a private sanctuary where I could escape the demands of the crown. I played the piano in the evenings, the notes filling the empty halls with a melody that belonged only to me, a reminder of the girl I had once been. I also found solace in the act of drawing, sketching the gardens and the people I passed, capturing the world in lines of charcoal and watercolor. These artistic pursuits were my secret language, a way to process the overwhelming emotions that surge within me without the need for words. I kept a journal, filling page after page with my thoughts, my fears, and my hopes for the future. The handwriting in those early entries was tight and careful, reflecting a mind that was already forming strong opinions about duty and service. I wrote about the weight of the crown, the loneliness of the palace, and the strange, new feeling of being the most powerful person in the land. I wrote of my mother with a mixture of love and frustration, and of the uncle who had died leaving me to face the world alone. The text of these journals reveals a young woman who was already understanding the profound responsibility that had been placed upon her. She knew that her actions would shape the destiny of millions, and she accepted this burden with a quiet resolve that surprised even herself. The year 1840 brought a change that would alter the course of my life forever. A change that began not with a decree or a battle, but with a simple, quiet meeting. I met Albert, my cousin, in a garden where the air was thick with the scent of blooming roses and the sound of bees humming in the heat. He was not a man of great stature or imposing presence, but he possessed a kindness that shone from his eyes and a mind that seemed to understand the world in the same way I did. We walked together through the paths of the garden, speaking of art, of music, and of the future we might build together. He spoke of his own country, of the people he loved, and of his desire to serve a purpose greater than himself. I felt a connection to him that I had never known, a sense of being seen and understood in a way that no one else had ever managed. The court watched us with a mixture of suspicion and hope, wondering if this union would bring stability or chaos to the throne. I did not care for their opinions, for in his presence I felt a peace that I had never known in the cold halls of Buckingham Palace. He was my confidant, my partner, and the love of my life. A man who would stand by my side through the darkest and brightest days of my reign. We were married in a ceremony that was simple yet profound. Surrounded by the people who mattered most to me. The wedding day was a blur of white silk and flowers, a vow spoken in a voice that trembled only slightly with emotion. I remember the feeling of his hand in mine, a steady, warm pressure that anchored me to the earth. The life we built together was one of shared dreams and shared burdens, of quiet moments and grand gestures. He helped me navigate the complexities of the empire, offering advice and support that was always grounded in wisdom and love. I found in him a strength that I had not known I possessed, a strength that allowed me to face the world with a renewed sense of purpose. Our love was a private thing, hidden behind the public face of the monarchy, yet it was the foundation upon which everything else was built. He was the one who could make me laugh when the weight of the crown felt too heavy, and the one who could listen when the silence of the palace became too loud. The years we spent together were the happiest of my life, filled with the simple joys of family and the deep satisfaction of a partnership that knew no bounds. The house at Osborne became our sanctuary, a place where we could escape the pressures of state and simply be ourselves. We walked in the gardens, the soil cool and damp beneath our feet, and sat by the sea, listening to the rhythmic crash of the waves against the shore. The sound of the water was a constant companion, a reminder of the eternal nature of the world beyond our small human concerns. I watched him draw the landscape, his pencil moving with a grace that mirrored the movement of the sea. He spoke of his plans for the estate, of the buildings he wished to construct, and the gardens he wished to plant. I listened, feeling a sense of peace that I had never known before, a peace that came from knowing that I was not alone in this vast and often lonely world. Our children were born into this world, 9 in total, each one a reflection of the love we shared. They grew up in the warmth of our home, surrounded by the books and the music and the art that we loved. I watched them play in the gardens, their laughter echoing off the walls, a sound that filled the house with a joy that I had never known. The years passed quickly, marked by the changing of the seasons and the growth of our family. I found that the burden of ruling was lighter when shared with a partner who understood the weight of the crown. He was my anchor, my guide, and my greatest love. The world continued to change around us, with new technologies and new ideas, reshaping the landscape of the empire. But in our small corner of the world, in the quiet rooms of Osborne, we found a peace that was timeless and enduring. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, sending warmth across the Persian rug that covered the wooden floor. Shadows lengthened slowly as the sun began its descent toward the horizon beyond the glass. The atmosphere was one of profound calm, inviting the rain had long since ceased its tapping against the glass, leaving behind a stillness that felt heavy with the weight of accumulated years. I remember the days when the world seemed to expand with a speed that nearly outpaced the breath in my lungs. a time when the very earth beneath our feet appeared to shift and rearrange itself under the force of iron and steam. The air in the mills was thick with the scent of wet cotton and coal dust, a gritty texture that settled deep in the throat of every worker, young and old. I watched as the legislation slowly took hold, a slow, moving current that began to lift the heaviest burdens from the smallest shoulders, limiting the hours those children could spend hunched over the spinning jennies. It was a change felt in the quieting of the machines at dusk, a new rhythm where the sun could set without the factory whistles screaming their final call. The railways stretched out like dark veins across the green landscape, carrying the black gold of coal and the red of iron to every corner of the island, fueling a fire that would warm the world. By the middle of the century, the workshops of the nation had grown so vast that they dominated the trade of every sea and shore, a testament to the relentless drive of a people who refused to stop. The political landscape remained steady, a calm harbor, despite the occasional storm of unrest that threatened to rock boat of the state. The monarchy adapted, shedding the sharp edges of absolute power to become a symbol, a steady head of state that watched over the shifting tides of history with a composed and distant gaze. I eventually took the title of Empress of India, a new name that stretched the reach of our influence far beyond the green hills of the British Isles into the vast, sun-drenched lands of Asia. This new designation was not merely a word, but a reflection of the growing influence we held in a continent that had long been a mystery to us, a strategic importance that anchored our global commerce. I became the first of my line to hold this specific imperial designation, a role that would remain with me until the final breath left my body, a constant reminder of the vast territories under my care. The coronation of the Empress of India took place in a grand ceremony in 1877, a celebration of the immense lands that now bowed to the crown, a moment of silence and splendor that marked a new chapter in our history. My reign lasted until the very end of 1901, making me the second longest reigning monarch. At the time of my passing, a span of time that witnessed the transformation of a nation. The political climate evolved from the initial instability of youth to a period of relative peace and prosperity that came to be known by my name. An era defined by the quiet hum of industry and the steady growth of the people. Reform Acts extended the vote to more men, gradually opening the doors of democracy to a wider segment of the population, changing the way the nation spoke to itself. The conservative and liberal parties competed for influence, shaping policies that touched the lives of the poor and the rich alike, affecting the schools, the hospitals, and the roads that connected us. Despite the external conflicts and the internal challenges that arose, the nation maintained a sense of continuity and purpose, a steady hand on the tiller. No, that guided us through the long years. The empire expanded its reach through diplomacy and trade, establishing colonies and protectorates across the dark continents of Africa and the scattered islands of the Pacific. A global presence that brought wealth, but also created complex and often difficult relationships with the indigenous populations and rival powers. The cultural life of the nation flourished alongside these political and economic changes, producing enduring works of literature and art that captured the spirit of the age. Writers and artists documented the tensions between the old traditions and the new modernity, creating a tapestry of the human experience that remains vivid in the memory. The period witnessed the rise of new social classes and the decline of the old aristocratic privileges in many areas. A shifting of the social order that was felt in the streets and the drawing rooms. Education became more widespread, allowing a broader segment of the population to participate in the intellectual and civic life of the nation. A light that was lit in the minds of the many. Scientific discoveries challenged the traditional beliefs of the past and opened new fields of inquiry into the natural world, revealing the secrets of the stars and the cells. The medical profession advanced significantly, reducing the mortality rates that had once claimed so many lives. A victory of knowledge over the ancient ravages of disease. The Durbar Room stands as a quiet reminder of the diverse influences that shaped the reign and the world that was known. The walls are covered in a rich tapestry of colors. Deep reds and golds that seem to glow in the soft light of the afternoon. The intricate patterns of the carpet beneath The feet are woven with a precision that speaks of a craft long perfected, a texture that invites the touch of a curious hand. The air inside the room is still, holding the scent of old wood and the faint, sweet aroma of incense that lingers from 1,000 ceremonies. A large wooden screen stands in the corner, carved with scenes of hunting and battle. The details sharp and clear. Despite the passage of time, the silence of the room, after the death, allowed it to become a symbol of a bygone era of stability and order. A place where the world seemed to pause. The conversion of these spaces ensured that the memory of the past would be preserved for the future. A sanctuary where the echoes of history could still be heard. The postcards of the room circulated the image of imperial grandeur to homes across the British Isles and beyond. A small piece of the vast empire that could be held in the palm of a hand. The silence of the room, after the death, allowed it to become a symbol of a bygone era of stability and order. A place where the world seemed to pause. The conversion of these spaces ensured that the memory of the past would be preserved for the future. A sanctuary where the echoes of history could still be heard. The postcards of the room circulated the image of imperial grandeur to homes across the British Isles and beyond. A small piece of the vast empire that could be held in the palm of a hand. The legacy of the reign was not merely political but also deeply embedded in the social fabric of the nation. A thread that ran through the lives of the people. The silence of the passing gave way to a new era. Yet the echoes of the rule remained audible for decades. A whisper that could still be heard in the quiet corners of the empire. The empire led became a global network of trade, culture, and governance that outlasted the lifetime of the ruler. A vast web that connected the world in ways that were never imagined. The specific details of the final years were preserved in the rooms that were once inhabited, now open to the curious public who wished to see the world as it was. The transformation of these spaces from private sanctuaries to public museums reflected the changing relationship between the monarch and the people. A shift from distance to intimacy. The postcards served as a bridge between the imperial past and the modern present, allowing history to be shared widely and understood deeply. The legacy of the Queen thus endures through the physical spaces that were left behind and the global reach of the empire that was built. The Durbar Room stands as a quiet reminder of the diverse influences that shaped the reign and the world that was known. The convalescent home at Osborne House provided care for those who had served the empire, extending the legacy of service to the next generation of workers. The postcards of the room circulated the image of imperial grandeur to homes across the British Isles and beyond. A small piece of the vast empire that could be held in the palm of a hand. The silence of the room after the death allowed it to become a symbol of a bygone era of stability and order. A place where the world seemed to pause. The conversion of these spaces ensured that the memory, "Yet canst thou kill me," of the past would be preserved for the future. A sanctuary where the echoes of history could still be heard. The literature and art of the time captured the spirit of the age, documenting the tensions between tradition and modernity in a way that felt both immediate and eternal. The new social classes rose, and the old aristocratic privileges declined in many areas. Kill me, a shift that was felt in the very bones of the society. Education became more widespread, allowing a broader segment of the population to participate in the intellectual and civic life of the nation. A light that was lit in the minds of the many. Scientific discoveries challenged the traditional beliefs of the past and opened new fields of inquiry into the natural world, revealing the secrets of the stars and the cells. The medical profession advanced significantly, reducing the mortality rates that had once claimed so many lives. A victory of knowledge over the ancient ravages of disease. The final years of the rule unfolded within the quiet confines of Osborne House on the Isle of Wight. A retreat from the public eye with a steady determination that marked the later decades. The daily routine became a series of small, deliberate actions performed with practiced precision, a rhythm that brought order to the chaos of the world. The vast empire. The rain falls softly against the leaded glass of Osborne House. A rhythmic tapping that has become the heartbeat of these final years. Here, in the quiet sanctuary of the Isle of Wight, the world beyond the curtains feels distant. A muted hum of empire and duty that once demanded every breath. I sit by the window, watching the gray waves roll in, their white crests breaking with a gentle, eternal sigh. The scent of salt and damp earth drifts through the open sash, mingling with the faint, lingering aroma of lavender and old paper that fills this room. My hands rest upon the wooden arm of the chair, the grain worn smooth by decades of touch, a tactile anchor to a life that has spanned so much change. The fire crackles low in the grate, casting long, dancing shadows that seem to whisper of the past, of faces long turned to dust, of voices that once filled these halls with laughter and argument. It is a peaceful silence, not the empty silence of neglect, but the heavy, comforting silence of memory. The clock on the mantel ticks with a steady, unhurried pace, marking the seconds not as a countdown, but as a gentle progression toward rest. In this stillness, the weight of the crown feels less like a burden and more like a familiar cloak, woven from threads of joy and sorrow, of triumph and profound loss. The air is cool, inviting a deep, slow breath that settles the spirit. There is no rush here, no urgent summons from the ministers or the generals. Only the rain, the sea, and the quiet unfolding of a life. Reviewed in the soft light of the afternoon, the loss of Albert left a silence so profound it seemed to swallow the very air within the palace walls. That silence became a companion, a constant presence that walked beside me through the long corridors of mourning. I withdrew from the public eye with a steady determination, retreating into the private chambers where the dust motes danced in the golden beams of afternoon light. The vast empire continued to expand under the weight of my long reign. Yet I felt the pull of the small, the specific, the tangible. I found solace in the details of state business, in the careful review of letters, in the management of the household. These tasks provided a structure, a rhythm that kept the days from blurring into a single, formless gray. The support of servants and loyal friends formed a foundation that held me when the grief threatened to pull me under. They moved around me with a quiet efficiency, their presence a reminder that life continued, even in the deepest winter of the soul. I balanced the role of a mother with the responsibilities of a sovereign, nor yet a task that required a strength I did not know I possessed until it was demanded. The transition from a young bride to a widowed queen was a journey through a landscape of snow and ice, where every step required deliberate care. My grief shaped my worldview, influencing how I approached governance. In the years that followed, I found ways to cope by immersing myself in the details of the world around me, in the care of the estate, in the reading of history and literature. The Durbar room stood as a testament to the empire's diverse connections within my private spaces. This room, constructed by Sikh artisans, was not open to the public until after I died, preserving its intimate atmosphere for a time. The walls were adorned with intricate patterns, the colors vibrant and deep, a splash of warmth against the cooler tones of the house. I remember walking through that space, running my fingers over the carved wood, feeling the texture of the craftsmanship. It was a place where the far reaches of the empire met the quiet of my home. The room was maintained as a kind of museum, where a selection of decadent artifacts remained on display for visitors. These images circulated widely, creating a shared visual memory of the imperial court for the general public. The postcards served as tangible links to a past that was rapidly becoming history for the new century. Despite the silence of the archives regarding my personal art, the richness of the cultural legacy remained. My influence on the arts of that time was profound and far-reaching. The historical record preserves the memory of my patronage, even if it omits my personal practice. This distinction highlights the different ways in which individuals can contribute to the artistic landscape. My story is one of support and encouragement, rather than personal creation. The absence of my own works allows the works of those I supported to shine with greater clarity. The legacy of my patronage continues to inspire scholars and artists alike. The quiet strength of my contribution lies in the spaces I created and the artists I empowered. The Indian dining room remains a sanctuary of art and history for those who seek it. It offers a peaceful reflection on the power of collaboration and the beauty of shared vision. The silence of the archives regarding my personal art, death, does not diminish the richness of my cultural legacy. My influence on the arts of my time was profound and far-reaching. The historical record preserves the memory of my patronage, even if it omits my personal practice. This distinction highlights the different ways which individuals can contribute to the artistic landscape. My story is one of support and encouragement, rather than personal creation. The absence of my own works allows the works of those I supported to shine with greater clarity. The legacy of my patronage continues to inspire scholars and artists alike. The quiet strength of my contribution lies in the spaces I created and the artists I empowered. The Indian dining room remains a sanctuary of art and history for those who seek it. It offers a peaceful reflection on the power of collaboration and the beauty of shared vision. The afternoon light filtered softly through the heavy velvet drapes of the drawing room at Osborne House. Dust motes danced in the golden beams that illuminated the polished surface of a mahogany writing desk. A silver inkwell sat beside a stack of handwritten letters, their pages yellowed with the passage of time. Say, the scent of dried lavender lingered in the air, mixed with the faint aroma of beeswax from the furniture polish. Outside the window, the gentle sound of waves lapped against the rocky shore of the Isle of Wight. The room felt still and suspended in time, as if the world outside had ceased its frantic movement. A small porcelain figurine of a shepherdess stood on the mantelpiece, watching over the quiet space with painted eyes. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, sending warmth across the Persian rug that covered the wooden floor. Shadows lengthened slowly as the sun began its descent toward the horizon beyond the glass. The atmosphere was one of profound calm, inviting the observer to rest and reflect on the day that had passed. No voices disturbed the silence, only the rhythmic breathing of the house itself in its evening slumber. My daily routine became a series of small, deliberate actions performed with practiced precision. I took long walks in the gardens of my various estates. When the weather permitted, the air was crisp, the scent of pine and damp earth filling the lungs. I enjoyed reading history and literature, often spending hours in quiet study with my private secretaries. I also found solace in painting and sketching the landscapes that surrounded my homes. The brush moved across the paper, capturing the light on the water, the curve of the hills, the texture of the bog. I maintained a strict routine that provided structure to my days even during periods of deep mourning. My relationship with my children was complex, yet filled with genuine affection and high expectations. I worried constantly about their health and happiness as they dispersed across Europe to marry into other royal houses. The death of Albert left a void that no "canst thou kill me" other person could ever truly fill for the grieving widow. I relied heavily on my servants and close friends to help me navigate the challenges of widowhood. My later years were spent mostly at Osborne House, on the Isle of Wight, where I sought peace. The quiet rooms of this residence offered a sanctuary away from the demands of court life and public scrutiny. I passed away peacefully on the 22 January 1901 at the age of 81. My legacy remained one of stability and moral fortitude that shaped the British monarchy for generations to come. By the end of my rule, an estimated 1 in 4 people on Earth were subjects of the British Empire. This immense reach brought a sense of stability to the global order during my lifetime. The sheer scale of the territories under my nominal rule reshaped international politics and cultural exchange for generations to come. Historians continue to analyze the complex nature of my legacy through the lens of imperial expansion and domestic stability. Some scholars note that the provided text does not detail my legacy in specific academic terms. Other sources similarly contain no details about my major works or specific philosophical contributions to governance. The absence of certain details in these texts suggests the breadth of my influence was often felt rather than explicitly catalogued in every document. Public perception of the monarchy shifted significantly during my widowhood. The heavy velvet curtains drew the outside world away, leaving only the soft rustle of silk against the stone floor. I remember sitting in that quiet room, where the air smelled of beeswax and dried lavender, feeling the weight of a crown that had grown lighter with time. The empire stretched out like a vast tapestry, its threads pulled tight by my own hands and the hands of those who served me. It was a time of great movement, yet within these walls there was only the slow turning of pages and the scratch of a pen on paper. I watched my children scatter across the map, each one a new thread in a pattern I had helped to weave. The eldest son waited with a patience that mirrored my own, knowing his turn would come in the fullness of time. His eyes held the same quiet determination that had guided me through decades of change and loss. The house at Osborne became a sanctuary where the noise of state could be muted by the sound of the sea. I walked the gardens often, feeling the damp earth beneath my boots and the cool breeze against my face. The waves rolled in with a rhythm that matched the beating of my own heart, steady and sure. There was a profound calm in these final years, a sense that the long journey was nearing its end. The burden of ruling had shaped me, turning a young bride into a woman of steel and sorrow. Grief was a constant companion, sitting beside me in the chair across the room, silent and understood. I found strength in the details of daily life, in the care of the household, and the signing of documents. The support of my servants and friends provided a foundation that held me when the world felt too heavy to bear. My life became a testament to the resilience required to endure such profound loss. The Queen's dedication to family and country defined an era that now bears my name in the history books. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, sending warmth across the Persian rug that covered the wooden floor. A small porcelain figurine of a shepherdess stood on the mantelpiece, watching over the quiet space with painted eyes. Shadows lengthened slowly as the sun began its descent toward the horizon beyond the glass. The atmosphere was one of profound calm, inviting the observer to rest and reflect on the day that had passed. No voices disturbed the silence, only the rhythmic breathing of the house itself in its evening slumber. The scent of polished wood and the texture of the fabrics added to the sensory experience of this peaceful moment. It was a place where art and history converged in a single, meditative space. The room stood as a silent witness to the later years and the enduring curiosity that remained. The craftsmanship of the artisans was evident in every corner, creating a harmonious environment that soothed the spirit. The careful attention to detail offered a visual rhythm that matched the quiet thoughts of the mind. My children, 9 in total, had scattered across Europe to form royal alliances that bound nations together. They became kings and queens, in their own right, carrying my blood and my values to distant courts. The eldest son, Albert Edward, waited patiently for the moment he would ascend the throne. I maintained a deep connection to my late husband, Prince Albert, even as the years passed and the silence grew longer. I often spoke of him in my private journals with a gentle and enduring affection that never faded. The house at Osborne served as a sanctuary where I could escape the pressures of state and find peace. I spent much of my time walking in the gardens or sitting by the sea, listening to the waves. The sound of the water provided a constant rhythm to my solitary afternoons, a lullaby for the weary soul. My health began to decline gradually, yet I remained mentally sharp until the very end of my days. I continued to sign documents and review state papers with a focused intensity that surprised even those around me. The weight of the crown felt lighter as I approached the final chapter of my life. No longer a burden, but a symbol. I prepared for my departure with a calm acceptance that reflected the long experience of a life fully lived. The world outside continued its busy pace, unaware of the quiet end approaching within these walls. My legacy was already being written in the stone and laws of the nation, etched into the fabric of history. I had transformed the monarchy into a symbol of moral authority and domestic virtue for the people to see. The transition from romantic idealism to pragmatic governance defined my long and eventful reign. I managed the affairs of state with a steady hand that never wavered in times of crisis or uncertainty. The vast empire I had guided continued to expand under the weight of my long reign, reaching across oceans and continents. By the end of my rule, an estimated 1 in 4 people on Earth were subjects of the British Empire. This immense reach brought a sense of stability to the global order during my lifetime. A quiet order amidst the chaos of change. My influence manifested through the commissions I issued to professional artists and architects of my time, shaping the visual culture of the age. Prince Albert shared this deep interest in visual culture and often collaborated with me on such projects of great importance. Together, we supported the burgeoning field of photography as a new medium for historical record, capturing moments that would last forever. We commissioned images to capture significant moments within the palace walls for posterity, ensuring that history would not be forgotten. One notable example involved a staged reenactment of our wedding ceremony that took place in 1854, a moment frozen in time. This event demonstrated our desire to control the visual narrative of our own history through the power of art and image. We understood the power of imagery to shape public perception and preserve memory for generations to come. Our patronage extended to various forms of artistic expression beyond the traditional boundaries of painting and sculpture. We encouraged the development of new techniques that could serve the needs of the monarchy and the nation. The lack of personal artistic output does not diminish the significance of our contribution to the culture of the time. Our support helped establish a vibrant artistic community that flourished under our protection and guidance. The absence of data regarding my own technique allows historians to focus on the broader cultural impact of my reign. It remains unclear if I ever attempted to sketch or paint in a private setting, for the archives hold no such record. The silence in the archives regarding my personal practice is a consistent feature of the historical record of my life. Researchers have found no mention of my major works in the standard reference materials that document the era. This absence stands in contrast to the detailed accounts of my public life and political decisions that fill the books. The focus remains on my role as a patron rather than as a creator of original art for the public eye. The Indian dining room remains a prime example of my ability to foster artistic collaboration and connection with the wider world. It stands as a physical manifestation of my vision and my desire to connect with the global community of artisans. The artisans who built it left their mark on history through their skilled labor and dedication to their craft. Their work endures as a reminder of the appreciation for global artistic traditions that I held in my heart. The room invites a slow and thoughtful observation of its intricate details and the stories they tell. The silence of the archives regarding my personal art does not diminish the richness of the cultural legacy I left behind. My influence on the arts of my time was profound and far-reaching, shaping the aesthetic of a nation. The historical record preserves the memory of my patronage, even if it omits the details of my own creative efforts. The room where I passed was filled with the soft light of a winter morning, a gentle glow that seemed to welcome the end. My son Edward V. Sickett succeeded me immediately upon my death in 1901, taking up the mantle of leadership with a steady hand. The era that had begun with my coronation in 1837 finally drew to a close, marking the end of a century. The silence that followed my passing was profound and deeply felt across the empire. A moment of collective stillness. My life had spanned a century of unprecedented change and industrial growth, witnessing the birth of a new world. I saw the transformation of society from the old ways. The rain falls softly against the leaded glass of Osborne House, a rhythmic tapping that has become the heartbeat of these final years. Here, in the quiet sanctuary of the Isle of Wight, the world beyond the curtains feels distant. A muted hum of empire and duty that once demanded every breath. I sit by the window, watching the gray waves roll in, their white crests breaking with a gentle, eternal sigh. The scent of salt and damp earth drifts through the open sash, mingling with the faint, lingering aroma of lavender and old paper that fills this room. My hands rest upon the wooden arm of the chair, the grain worn smooth by decades of touch, a tactile anchor to a life that has spanned so much change. The fire crackles low in the grate, casting long, dancing shadows that seem to whisper of the past, of faces long turned to dust, of voices that once filled these halls with laughter and argument. It is a peaceful silence, not the empty silence of neglect, but the heavy, comforting silence of memory. The clock on the mantel ticks with a steady, unhurried pace, marking the seconds not as a countdown, but as a gentle progression toward rest. In this stillness, the weight of the crown feels less like a burden and more like a familiar cloak, woven from threads of joy and sorrow, of triumph and profound loss. The air is cool, inviting a deep, slow breath that settles the spirit. There is no rush here, no urgent summons from the ministers or the generals. Only the rain, the sea, and the quiet unfolding of a life. Reviewed in the soft light of the afternoon, the years after Albert left were not a sudden collapse, but a slow, deliberate withdrawal into the shell of grief. I dressed in black, a fabric that absorbed the light and softened the sharp edges of the world. The color became a second skin, a constant reminder of the love that remained even as the heart grew quiet. People spoke of a decline, of a queen who had vanished behind a curtain of sorrow. Yet, they did not see the work being done in the shadows. The desk was always covered with papers, the inkwell never dry, the pen moving with a steady rhythm. Across the page, state business continued to flow through these quiet hands. A river that did not stop for personal pain. I read reports, sign decrees, and listen to the voices of ministers who came to the room with careful steps. The empire expanded under this quiet rule, spreading its reach to corners of the globe that had never known British law. It was a strange time, where the world grew larger, while the personal circle grew smaller. The children grew up and moved away, their own lives unfolding in distant lands, leaving the house to the sound of the sea and the scratching of the pen. A small porcelain figurine of a shepherdess stood on the mantelpiece, watching over the quiet space with painted eyes. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, sending warmth across the Persian rug that covered the wooden floor. Shadows lengthened slowly as the sun began its descent toward the horizon beyond the glass. The atmosphere was one of profound calm, inviting the observer to rest and reflect on the day that had passed. No voices disturbed the silence, only the rhythmic breathing of the house itself in its evening slumber. The burden of ruling an empire weighed heavily on the shoulders. Poor death, while the heartache of losing loved ones remained a constant companion. I found ways to cope by immersing myself in the details of state business and the care of the household. The support of servants and loyal friends provided a foundation that helped endure the years of mourning. The transition from a young bride to a widowed queen required a strength of character that few could emulate. Grief shaped the worldview and influenced the approach to governance in later years. The life story remains a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of profound loss. The dedication to family and country defined the era that bears the name today. The final years unfolded within the quiet confines of this house on the Isle of Wight. I retreated from the public eye with a steady determination that marked the later decades. The daily routine became a series of small, nor yet canst thou kill me, deliberate actions performed with practiced precision. The vast empire guided, continued to expand. Under the weight of the long reign, by the end of the rule, an estimated 1 in 4 people on Earth were subjects of the British Empire. This immense reach brought a sense of stability to the global order during the lifetime. The 20th century arrived with its own style. Yet the Victorian age remained a distinct period in the history of the British Isles. The influence on the monarchy and the empire would endure for generations to come. The world remembered the Queen as a symbol of duty, family, and steadfastness. The quiet passing of the Queen was a moment of profound historical significance. The empire built would continue to shape the world for many years. The life had been a testament to the power of endurance and personal conviction. The final years were a time of reflection and preparation for the journey ahead. The end was faced with the same dignity that had characterized the entire reign. The legacy left behind was one of stability and moral purpose. The nation mourned the loss, but celebrated the long and remarkable life that had been lived. The sun set over the Isle of Wight, casting a warm glow over the house. The sea continued its endless rhythm, indifferent to the changes in human affairs. The quiet of the room remained undisturbed as the day turned into night. The story concluded with a sense of peace and finality. The life had been a long journey that ended in the place loved most. The world moved on, but the memory remained etched in the history of the age. The gas lamps of the street flickered against the twilight, guiding the footsteps of late walkers home. The room felt suspended in time, a sanctuary where the noise of nor the industrial city could not penetrate. Dust motes danced slowly in the shafts of light, moving with a rhythm that matched the slow passage of hours. A small clock on the mantel ticked with a steady, reassuring sound that marked the quiet progression of the day. The silence was deep and complete, broken only by the occasional turning of a page or the scratch of a pen on paper. This space offered a moment of stillness amidst the relentless forward motion of the 19th century. The major works consisted instead of the vast diaries maintained throughout the long and eventful reign. These journals recorded daily events with a precision that later historians found invaluable for understanding the era. The Queen wrote extensively about family life, duties, and deep grief following the death of the husband. The practice began early in life and continued until the silence that followed the final breath was not an end, but a quiet handoff to those who understood the weight of the work left behind. My sister-in-law Johanna took up the mantle with a steadiness that surprised even the most skeptical critics of the time. She gathered the scattered letters and the small, rough sketches that had been dismissed as the ravings of a troubled mind. These papers were not merely ink on rag. They were the raw, trembling heartbeat of a brother who saw the world in colors others could not name. She moved through the galleries of Europe with a fierce determination, placing these canvases in rooms where the light caught the thick, swirling impasto of his brushstrokes. The air in those exhibition halls changed when his work arrived, filling with a strange, electric hum that drew the eye and held it. People stopped their conversations to stare at the yellow suns and the cypress trees that seemed to reach for a sky that was always just out of reach. It was a slow awakening, a gradual realization that the madness they had feared was actually a profound clarity. The world began to see what he had seen, a universe vibrating with an intensity that demanded to be felt rather than just observed. A heavy oak table stands in the center of the room, its surface scarred by years of use and covered in a fine layer of dust that catches the afternoon light. The wood grain runs in long, dark rivers, interrupted by the silver veins of old repairs that have been filled with wax. Upon the table rests a single, unframed canvas, the paint still raised in thick ridges of ochre and cobalt blue. The smell of linseed oil and turpentine lingers faintly in the air. A sharp, medicinal scent that has not fully faded despite the passing of decades. A velvet cloth, worn thin at the edges, lies folded nearby, its deep red color muted by time but still rich to the touch. The silence here is absolute, broken only by the distant, rhythmic sound of a ship's bell tolling from the harbor. The light shifts slowly across the canvas, revealing the texture of the brushwork, The way the pigment was applied with a knife as much as a brush. It is a space of stillness, where the chaos of creation has settled into a permanent, peaceful order. The influence of his vision began to ripple outward, touching artists who sought to break the rigid rules of the academies. They saw in his work a permission to let emotion dictate the form, to let the color of a shadow be violet rather than gray. The Expressionists found a kindred spirit in his wild, emotional landscapes, while the Fauves embraced his bold, unblended hues that sang with a pure, unadulterated joy. His letters, once hidden away, became a roadmap for a new generation, guiding them away from the dull realism of the 19th century. They learned that art was not about copying the world as it was, but about capturing the world as it felt. The museums of the world slowly began to fill with his images, each one a beacon for those who felt the world too deeply. The paintings traveled across oceans, hanging in the great halls of Paris, New York, and Tokyo, where millions would stop to gaze at the swirling skies and the quiet, contemplative figures. The sheer number of his works that survive is a testament to the care taken to preserve them. With over 800 paintings and more than 1,000 drawings now held in public collections, the light in the gallery is soft and diffused, filtering through high windows to illuminate the dust motes dancing in the air. The walls are painted a pale, neutral gray, allowing the vibrant colors of the canvases to stand out with startling clarity. A velvet rope separates the viewer from the art, a simple barrier that creates a sense of reverence and distance. The floor is made of polished stone, cool and smooth underfoot, reflecting the faint glow of the overhead lamps. In the corner, a small wooden bench invites the weary traveler to sit and rest, to let the eyes wander over the details of a starry night or a sunflower field. The air is still, carrying the faint scent of the varnish used to protect the paint, a sweet, resinous smell that speaks of careful conservation. Outside the window, the city moves with a frantic energy. But inside, time seems to have suspended itself. The silence is deep and heavy, a blanket that wraps around the viewer, inviting a state of calm observation. It is a place where the noise of the world fades away, leaving only the visual language of color and form. The legacy of his life is not found in the fame he never knew, but in the quiet way his images continue to speak to the human condition. The paintings are no longer just objects. They have become a part of the collective memory. The collective memory, a shared language of emotion that transcends borders and languages. They hang in the great museums, watched by millions. Each viewer bringing their own story to the encounter. The cypress trees still stand tall against the night sky. The sunflowers still burn with a golden fire, and the wheat fields still ripple with the wind of a long ago summer. Nor yet canst thou kill me. The world has changed in ways he could never have imagined. Yet the emotional truth of his work remains untouched by time. It is a strange and beautiful thing to know that a life so filled with pain and isolation has resulted in such a vast and enduring gift. The silence of the archives is filled with the voices of those who found comfort in his art. Poor Death, a chorus of gratitude that echoes through the decades. The work remains a permanent record of a soul that saw the world with a clarity that few can ever hope to achieve. The final resting place of his spirit is not in a grave, but in the light that falls across his canvases every day. The museums are his true home now, filled with the quiet admiration of those who understand the depth of his vision. The paintings stand as silent witnesses to the enduring power of art to heal and to connect. They remind us that even in the darkest moments,